Today, we are honored to host arts journalist Andrew Gilbert. Born and raised in Los Angeles, Andrew Gilbert is an award-winning Berkeley-based freelance writer who covers jazz, international music, and dance for the San Francisco Chronicle, the Bay Area News Group, KQED Arts, and other publications. His work has appeared in the Boston Globe, the Los Angeles Times, and the Seattle Times, and numerous magazines. I personally have seen Andy at many performances dedicated to covering local artists in our music scene. It is such a pleasure to have him, and without further ado, Andrew Gilbert.
Thank you so much, Crystal. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Mark, InterMusic SF for doing this. I thought I would start just talking a little bit about what I do and what I don't do, and how I have a sort of a unusual, very particular career as a journalist. So the kinds of things I'm talking about might not be relevant to everyone, but it very well could be useful for many different kinds of musicians. So what I do, I'm a freelance writer. I have never had a staff job on a publication for a newspaper or magazine. I have been full-time freelance since about 1998, 1999. So that means I don't think of myself as a critic. I write some reviews, not many these days. Mostly I write features and stories about artists, usually pegged to performances or events or something that is happening. What I don't do, and this might be sort of basic for a lot of people, is I'm not a publicist. And I think artists often get this confused. They'll contact me and sort of say, hey, can you help me publicize this show? And I totally get the sort of the confusion, because if you get press coverage, that is publicizing your show. But a publicist's role is really different. There are great publicists out there. I work with them. I get hired by publicists to write press releases or bios for musicians. So there's that relationship. But as a journalist, I've got a very different role, which is trying to cover the scene in a lot of ways and what is going on. And I sort of think of it like the big picture of what I do is it's like there's this vast landscape of creativity out there, of performing arts. And I'm sort of doing this endless series of miniatures, like a David Hockney image made out of Polaroids. And if you put them all together, you'll hopefully get a big view of what in this case, mostly the Bay Area scene, though I also cover a lot of, obviously, artists from outside the Bay Area who are performing here. So thinking about arts journalism and my role as a journalist, again, it's very different than, say, covering politics, or even if I was a staff writer, where, say, you are the staff classical music writer reviewer for the San Francisco Chronicle. Your beat is to cover the symphony, the opera, the different major organizations, smaller organizations, and you're often focused on those organizations, right? What's happening with the budget? You know, who's going to replace Esa-Pekka Salonen? I mean, right? This is, I don't really do that because that's in-depth, time-intensive reporting, and no one's paying me to do that. I'm getting paid to write and to write and sell individual stories on artists. And through doing that, I often end up doing some institutional coverage, but that's not my focus, because it wouldn't make any sense for me to be doing that. I wouldn't make a living doing that. So I think of what I do, my practice, in a lot of ways as a collaboration with artists. I want to try and portray what people are doing, how they're making, how their work is evolving, where they're presenting it, what forces are shaping it. And that's going to happen in, working with, in dialogue with the artists. And I should say hello to people online. Anyone has any questions, I'd like to make this as much as a conversation as possible. So you guys, if you have questions, feel free to ask. It might be something I'm going to get to later, but I'm totally happy to interrupt whatever I'm talking about if you have something comes to mind. So thinking in terms of that collaboration, what I wanted to do at first is just kind of lay out what journalists need in order to make that collaboration happen. And then I want to go into a little later talking about what I'm looking for a story, what I think makes a good story, or more importantly than a good story, what makes a story something that I'm going to pitch to an editor and they're going to say, let's do it. But for starters, I mean, this is journalism 101, right? When you write a news story, you write any story, your journalists are supposed to answer, right, the 5 questions: who, what, why, when, where, right? And this is the same in cultural reporting. This is sort of going to be the top of the story. You want to be able to answer these questions. So in order to facilitate that, and this is just sort of advice for artists working with journalists, is one of the most basic things you need is a decent website, right? And this is when arts journalists get together, one of the things we bitch about with each other is that you go to an artist's website and there's no contact info. You know they're doing something interesting, or you heard about it, or you want to investigate it, and you go to a site, there's no email, there's no place to put in a comment. You're like, okay, they don't have a publicist listed. What do you do with that? That means there's 2, 3 extra steps, and a lot of times I'll just say, forget it, or depending what the story is. So most basic thing, be easy to reach. And it doesn't have to be your phone number, website. You could have the form that you fill, where someone fills out, where hopefully you are monitoring that. And if someone says interview request, you get back to that quickly, because sometimes a journalist has a day or two to work on a story, and they need to need it to happen. I want to say Instagram is not a substitute for a website. It doesn't function in the same way. It doesn't have, I'm all for artists working that, but it doesn't provide the same concentration of information that journalists are going to want and need. Yeah, Destiny.
Social media platforms, they're engaging, but not they're having the basic information that you would require.
You want to repeat the question?
Oh yeah, why don't you, Mark?
I believe you were asking, is that true across the board with other social media platforms where you would prefer a concentrated website? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, there are, I suppose, there are other situations. There are ways that, for certain artists, where it might make sense, Substack or something. But in general, I think, because I'll get to the other elements that you really want with that, besides the contact is, so for performing artists, right, you want updated gig info, right? I mean, again, I go to an artist's website and the last gigs listed are 2022. And I know they were just working, and it's not helpful. The other thing is, if possible, if you're to have personnel info. I mean, I know a lot of times that's being pinned down at the last minute. It's not there. But if you have a working group and that working group's do it, list your people. I mean, I'll tell you, that is something I will make decisions on whether to pitch a story or not, sometimes based on the side people or the whole ensemble, because there's a musician I'm really interested in who's, isn't the leader, but there's someone who I think, oh, it gives me a chance to talk to them too, find out what they're doing. So it's just all to the good, right? It's a way of sort of, you build the community, you promoting fellow artists. Your bio, right? And this is something we'll come back to. Having a good bio is essential with, I mean, basic info of, where you're from, what you do, having, I mean, this is just a pet peeve, having it well copy edited is really good. It's always a little sad where, I'll look at a vocalist website and they say their idol is Sarah Vaughan, and Vaughan is spelled wrong, one of the most commonly misspelled names. You see it a lot. I mean, it happens. We all, Lord knows I have misspelled people's names, but this is your website. You want it, you want it to reflect well. It's hard. Many artists find it's hard to write about themselves. Hire someone to do it, have a friend do it, is a good writer, but it doesn't have to be your whole life story. It can be funny, it can be serious, whatever tone you want to take, but have your story there and which means you've taken the time to think about what is your story, right? I'm going to come back to that because that's a lot about working with the press, is about stories. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a question. If a band leader has multiple bands, do there need to be a separate website for each band?
No, only if that makes sense. I mean, that's a lot of resources. It's a lot of upkeep. So if there's the, sort of the infrastructure there, sure. But there's a lot of artists I know have multiple projects going on, and they'll just have, those projects listed and have sort of resources there for each one, which is totally fine. In some ways, that makes it easier, right? Like to have it all in one place. So links, another thing a website should have. Links, if you've gotten coverage before that you like, link to it and try and keep those links fresh. It's obviously, I mean, if you're getting coverage, it gives you some credibility. People have found you're an interesting story before. So that's valuable.
Oh, no problem, no problem. I was actually
Videos. This is, I know, again, producing, if you're a musician or I mean, almost any kind of performing artist, it can be expensive. It is worth it to have a good video. And this isn't, I'm not talking like, you play at a club, like a place I love, say Bird and Beckett, where they put it, they put it online and they archive it all. That's, it's a 90-minute set or a 2-hour set with a break, unedited. That's great for someone who wants to go watch you. It's not useful for a journalist, because what I'm looking for is a 3 to 12-minute clip or piece that I could link to in a story I'm going to write. And an editor is going to ask for it, say, hey, what can we post with this? So if it takes investing, doing a 2 or 3 camera shoot, or being at a place where they do that already, having that, posting that on your website is really valuable. That's something that a lot of people will end up possibly using. And the thing, I can't stress this enough, I put 3 exclamation points in my notes here, is photos. And this in some ways it pains me as a writer, but the truth is, if a story of mine runs without a photo, if 10 people read it, I'd consider it lucky. If it runs with a strong image, a really good photo, people notice it. And it's, if you think about like what you look in magazines, newspapers, there are artists you'll see, their photos show up a lot. And it's not just because they're attractive or interesting. It's they had a photographer work with them who had got images that are really strong. So what you need on a website, I mean, this is like the most, after contact info, it's almost the most basic thing is high res downloadable images with photo credits. So any journalist, they don't even need to talk to you. And this will happen a lot is we're putting together our summer events. Write an item for it. An item is like maybe 50 words. And then sometimes that item, they run out of space. They're like, they just cut your text and they just put the gig info in the photo caption. And that's it. But because it's a strong image, I mean, it gets great placement and it runs. So I was, thinking about this. I could pull up, Mark. Well, there's just as an example. So one photographer, you'll see if you start looking for it, you'll see his images everywhere. Lenny Gonzalez, fantastic photographer, works with a lot of artists. And I mean, there are shots he took 15, 20 years ago, and they still come up because they're just such good images. Irene Young, another fantastic photographer, does portraits, shoots with artists. You see her images everywhere. And these are images like Irene has shots she took of Melba Liston, the great trombonist arranger. I mean, this is 35 years ago, and I've used them in stories I've written with her permission, with photograph. Young, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, these are Lenny's here, and you'll see like he'll take artists outside. He captures, he works with an artist to get their personality. So again, if I go to an artist's website and I'm looking for photos and they have sort of snapshots from gigs that are embedded and you can't download, there's no date, there's no photo credit. It's nice, but it's utterly useless for a journalist. That just doesn't do me any good. So can't stress that enough. That's really key. Yeah. Yeah, it can be. It could be a post, like from a photo session. It could be a concert shot. But, you want to be, I mean, it's whatever works. It's unresting. It's good to have black and white and color. I mean, if you can, but, either way is fine. Newspapers can work with either. It should just be something that catches your eye. And hopefully, the artist's face is prominently, captured, or something about them that makes them recognizable, even if it's not like a, full, it could be profile. But if you think, oh, that's, I recognize that artist. Okay, so those are just basic things in terms of working with the press to make it easy for people to cover what artists are doing. So then I want to talk about pitching yourself to journalists. And, oh, yeah.
It says, please distinguish the impact of a single band photo versus a series of action shots.
It just depends on sort of what the context of the coverage is. Generally speaking, say if it's a newspaper, it's going to be really rare that they use more than one photo, right? It's generally going to be, unless, it's some circumstance, some major event, and they'll want more than that. So I think it just depends. A band should have good band shots. It could also be good to have individual members of the band if it's, a manageable size band. Once you get bigger than a quintet or sextet, that starts, you're talking about a lot of photos. So, pitching yourself, and this is sort of the key of, and I'm talking again, this is sort of my idiosyncratic, very particular experience, because I'm, and again, sort of thinking about this as a collaboration, I'm pitching stories, right? This is, as a freelancer, I'm approaching editors, and I'm very fortunate. I have editors I work with regularly, so it's not like I'm cold calling, 90% of the time. They're expecting to get pitches from me, but I still need to come up with why. Why is this, why are we covering this artist, this event, this now, right? So there's, when's it happening? What's going on? Where all of these things can be elements of the pitch. A gig is happening somewhere interesting that music hasn't happened before. The where, the why, and the why is really the key. When you think about what makes a good story, there's right. We're talking about news. It's usually something that is happening that hasn't happened before exactly. So that can be the premiere of new music. Is a great something has been commissioned. It's being presented a certain time, a certain place. So that is built in. That's the elements of a pitch. The the timing is kind of key. And again, this is just sort of for working with journalists is lead time, right? I'll get notes or calls from musicians who are like, I have this amazing project. I'm like, well, when's it happening? They're like, next week. I'm like, well, okay, maybe I'll come, but good luck. But generally speaking, I'm pitching things 4, 6, 8 weeks out. You almost can't have enough lead time. If you know something is happening, you've got something happening in the summer of 2026, and you know details about it, and it's being presented, it's not too early to start letting people know about it, because I'm looking at lots of different things happening, and if it's something I really want to cover, it means that that's the same week that Alvin Ailey is playing at Zellerbach, and that's the same week this is happening, but I can move things around, find the right place to place a story. So lead time is really important. Yes. Generally speaking, I mean, it has happened. Someone said something's happening in 2 weeks and a story fell through. And I'm like, oh, great. I needed a story for that week for Bay Area News Group, and I can make that happen. But like, why, right? When you think about all the work that goes into, getting the gig, preparing for it, you're minimizing the chance of coverage, waiting. Yeah.
The question is, what does that notification look like? Is it a press release? Is it an email?
Yes and yes, but it doesn't have to be. Press releases are great because, again, it gets an artist to sort of organize, again, who, what, why, when, where. Basic info is in the top. And to start thinking about what is the story, right? So that's the artist. A press release is essentially an artist or a publicist pitching an editor or a journalist. And then I'm going to turn around and look at that and say, oh, what's the story I want to tell with this? What do I think is interesting? It might not be, there's going to be probably some congruence, but they probably won't be totally, overlapping. I'll have my take. And but it could be a casual email. But what's really useful is, again, just having the basic info in there. And that the thought has gone into what is going to make this a good story. And this is sort of, it all comes back to this. It's like, as a writer, what I'm trying to do is tell interesting stories, ultimately, about, in this case, what artists are doing, what they're presenting, what they're thinking, what they're dealing with, how that manifests in their creative output. I mean, yeah, yeah, sure.
the question is, do you prefer the pitch to come from the artist or from an agent?
You know, I don't really have a preference. I there's a lot of publicist agents who I work with a lot, you know, because they work with artists who I'm going to cover. Artists, artists, I mean, I know it can be awkward for artists to pitch themselves. I totally get that. Like but I think reaching out themselves, I don't know if I can't say I'm more likely to respond, but I try to stay on top of it. I don't all the time. And I know this is this thing is like, I'm overwhelmed. All my editors are overwhelmed. All pitch editors, I never hear back from them sometimes. It's this, and I try not to do that with artists, but I know there's people who I'm like, oh, I'm going to get back to them. And then the gig has happened. And sometimes I'll try and write and say, hey, I want artists to know if I got an assignment, obviously I would have gotten in touch with them. And for whatever reason, I may have pitched it and didn't get it. It just didn't make sense. I had an assignment already. I wasn't able to find a place for it. Any number of reasons. And this is something I'm going to come back to, but I just can't say enough is, don't get discouraged. This is, if you're an artist, it's the long game, right? Whatever project it is you're working, you're going to have another one. And every time an artist reaches out to me, if it's an interesting project, I'm thinking like, damn, I didn't get to cover that I really wanted to. Next one comes up, I'm going to do my best to do it. So it's, everyone, right? Everyone faces a lot of rejection in this field. You apply for grants, you try and get gigs. There's lots of, closed doors, emails you send that just seem to go into a black hole. But for myself, I'm seeing them and I'm like, I've got this document I keep of stories and artists I'm trying to pitch. And, I'm only going to get so many assignments. Yeah.
So we had something that you were talking about it earlier, and before you go all the way into that realm, I wanted to address this question that came up in the chat. What does an ideal promo and pitch package look like? I don't know if you were going to go into this later on, but I just wanted to bring that up from your perspective. What does that look like? Because I feel like that could influence a lot of folks.
Right. What's funny is it's not, I don't have like some image of the ideal sort of presentation. I mean, the ideal is that it's a really cool project, right? And that whatever is being sent to me makes it clear why it's a really cool project. I'm just sort of say the Oakland Ballet did their Dancing Moons Festival, right? And they presented some excerpts of the work on Angel Island, and it was all based, these commissioned all these Asian American choreographers to do works inspired by Angel Island. I mean, that's just such a great story, right? And so like getting that, I don't need bells and whistles. I just like, new works, festival happening at the Paramount, going to, work being presented on Angel Island in front of the immigration station. That's like, that has, for just personally, that has everything I love. History, all these different elements. So it really comes down to like the content. And this comes into like really, what is the story of a work? What is an artist's story? And again, sort of the pitch. And so I was thinking, okay, a premiere is there's a new work, a commission that's happening. A milestone, right? Journalists, like the media, we love numbers, milestones. It's the first, we're celebrating a 1-year anniversary of a monthly or weekly residency at this place. This is what it's meant to us. We've got, it's led to this. That's a good story, and I would, it means I'd have a chance to go out and check it out, get some, what the vibe is, set the scene with that. So milestone stories, 1 year, 5 years, whatever, like that's, the group has been together for 10 years. We're doing our 10th. We don't play all that often, but it's 10 years we've been developing this repertoire. That's a natural story. And then just well, album release, obviously, or you know, what's that the equivalent of that. Now I know albums have become this, like, you know, like what's an album? It's like, well, maybe you put out a CD, maybe it's on Bandcamp, maybe it's an EP or a track. Um, I find, in terms of like this whole narrative of like telling a story, albums are still valuable, but I totally get that, you know, it's the money it takes to produce, and, you know, an album, the artist likely is not going to make that back. So, you know, again, is it the long game? Does it make sense? Does it help you get festival gigs and get press and that? That's, you know, every artist has to calculate that for themselves. But an album release is like, I'm regularly pitching my editor, including that so-and-so is playing the Joe Henderson Lab at the SF Jazz Center. They have a new album coming out, and there's some story behind the album. And so it all sort of comes down to all of these things. News, like what is happening that that I can take to the editor, or to the journalist, and say, this is happening now, and this is why we should cover it now. And if we miss it, we miss that event, and we're going to look lame because we didn't cover it, and this cool thing was happening, right? So storylines, and this is where artists, it could be sort of a self-conscious thing to do. And you know, some people, it comes really naturally. They present themselves, you know, everything they do is part of some larger narrative. And lots of musicians, lots of artists, that doesn't come naturally. That's not how they think about themselves. That's not how their creative process works. But in working with journalists, if you know, you're taking the trouble, you're devoted your life to whatever the art form is, you're going to want to be recognized and covered, and figure out, well, what does that mean, right? Like what is the story you're telling? And we could all say, well, like the music sort of speaks for itself, which is true, but if people aren't finding out about the music and they're not hearing it, then it's not speaking very loudly, right? You want to try and reach your audience, and people who might not think they were interested in this at all, but because you have an interesting story to tell, a way of presenting that and framing that, a journalist will find it interesting and pitch a story on it. So, I mean, this, again, there's infinite variety, right? And there's definitely, it's funny, the trumpeter Ian Carey talks about the, is it the commissioning? No, the industrial complex, basically that artists sort of bend themselves to get, you know, the grant, right? You know, that there's this grant available, and, you know, it's not really what you do, but like, you want to get the grant, you want the support. So you kind of twist yourself into doing that. And I mean, again, there's nothing wrong with that. Organizations do that. It makes a lot of sense. But in terms of telling your story, I mean, I think it behooves artists to work with, you know, what is most authentically, you know, what they're most interested in, what they're passionate about, what it is that, you know, motivates them to make art. Yeah.
Have you found amounts of success, greater or lesser, for folks who work with certain types of people to help tell those stories where it's really difficult for them personally? Like, I don't know what necessarily that would look like, but do you have any advice on that? Like who to talk to like get that story told if you're insecure about it or anything like that?
That's a great question. And I mean, it just comes down to resources. I mean, in some ways, like that's what a manager will do. But I mean, like, you know, in the realistic world, for so many musicians, you know, having a manager isn't like the pie isn't big enough to support a manager. So how do you do that? I mean, working with writers, I mean, people do hire me to do this. And I think one thing that artists can do is, is you're looking around and sort of like, oh, someone has a really great website that you like. Well, who did that for them? And you ask, someone has a great photo, using each other as a resource. Someone has a really good bio you like. Who wrote it for them? Did they do it themselves? I think, in the same way that in the jazz world, artists often start by emulating the musicians they love. A bass player, you're emulating Ray Brown, and then you develop your own voice. I think that's a really good model for artists. You look who is sort of presenting themselves in a way that makes sense for you, that you think, oh, that, and figuring out, and hopefully whoever it is, you know them, you don't know them, but that they'll be open to talking about that, because again, it's a lifelong process for many of us, right? It's not, and hopefully you change and evolve, and what's work makes sense, coming out of, a conservatory or a program, at 23 or 24, in 10 years, you're going to be in a different place and have a whole different set of experience, and it makes sense to do something, and the story is different. But I really think looking around and who has a presentation that looks, whatever it is that attracted you, whether it's polished, it's just, it captures who they are, and, working that seems like a good direction. I mean, it's funny. I have taught, courses at the Graduate School of Journalism at Cal, and reporting on arts and culture. And it's this thing where it's like, well, you're kind of training people to do jobs that are barely there. And in some ways, I feel like I'm giving people advice, that sadly, what I'm doing in a lot of ways, it's arts journalists, it's an endangered species, right? There are few of us. So one thing to do is figure out, if you see a story you like, you think is well written, that captured an artist, make note of who it's by, right? There's, when I started doing this, started writing in the Bay Area in the mid 90s, I'd go to a opening night show at Yoshi's, and I'd see 5, 6 other writers who were there to cover it. This is not happening anymore. So there was the alt weeklies, there were all the different newspapers, there was websites happening. So it's the challenge is now like, well, who's out there? There's a few other freelancers, there's people with blogs, there's there are some folks. So making note of who they are, and really, I mean, artists supporting, have a subscription to a publication you like. I mean, it's all part of the arts ecosystem. And it's obviously self-interest, but I think journalism has a really important role to play in that arts ecosystem. So artists, it behooves artists to support it too. I thought I would just have some sort of case studies. I thought I would do, just to sort of show like, oh, this is how this story made sense to me. So let's do Pete Devine. Yeah. So Pete Devine, fantastic drummer, and he's mostly works in blues, but he's, played jazz, sort of ragtime, early jazz idioms. So I've written about the Howell Devine, the blues combo that he is part of, number of times over the years. Pete opened up a record store in Martinez. So, a business venture. And for the Bay Area News Group, which covers, sort of Contra Costa is a big part of it, went out to hang out with Pete at the record store and check it out, Pete and his wife, Sandy. So this was, a natural pitch, right? He'd been off the scene for a while. He'd been sick. He was coming back. They had a series of gigs. So there were a number of things coming together that made this, right? Like the band getting back together after being out for a while. Pete's got this cool record store. This for me, again, irresistible story. So I got to do that. So that's, and he was up for, he had reached out to me because he was up for Best of Martinez, like one of these online polls, and he was very excited about that. And I'm like, oh, like I'd been meaning to get out to the record store to check it out. Like that's a great story. So I was able to time the story to run while the poll was still open. I actually don't know if they won or not. I should follow up on that. So yeah, all different elements coming together. Like, my editor loved this idea immediately. Okay, let's do the SJZ San Jose. Oh, yeah, Crystal.
How many resources are necessary to make an album? And then it sometimes feels really timely, like you only have a small window of time before anybody wants to know anything about it, and then just sits on a shelf. And it's like, why? What is the time frame? Like, when does something become like, especially a record? Like, when does that become too long to push? I mean, when we're not relevant.
Yeah. So the question was, like what's the lifespan of a new album in terms of being an effective hook for a story? And it's kind of a moving target. The pandemic really changed things, and what really depends is what kind of music you're talking about. In popular music, it's like a month, I think. But again, that's sort of not my world, and I'm not pitching those stories. So but in sort of right, yes, absolutely, it is track by track, and I get so many. This track is dropping, and I'm like, I can't write about a track. It doesn't do me like I can't go to an editor and say this track happened, and that's not a story for me. So that's again not my world. But that's again, I do this very particular thing. In jazz and sort of improvised music and that I used to feel like the lifespan in terms of being a story was, could be 6 months. And I feel like now it's sort of longer. And yeah, and it's like, I mean, I'd say, and it's always tricky if something comes out in October, November, December, then it becomes, very quickly, well, it came out last year, and that kind of ages it quickly. But generally, I would say, I think 6 months after that. I mean, I might still, like when I'm pitching an editor, if someone is playing gigs related to an album that came out 8 months ago, and there's a sense that like, oh, but now we're playing this music, then I'm going to say they're celebrating the release of their most recent album. I won't say new album. I'll say most recent. So that can still work. And I don't know how much editors really pay attention, like one way or the other. So it's hard. And this is, Crystal, this is sort of this tricky thing, again, with me, is that I'm never inside the papers. I'm talking, rarely get an editor on the phone. It's email. I don't have a sense of sort of how decisions get made. I know what the final decision is. I get a green light, a red light, or I never hear anything back. And so, I mean, I obviously have a good sense of the elements that are going to interest certain editors because I work a lot and I get a lot of assignments. So it's not like it's a total mystery. But in other cases, actually, we can go to the Channel Tone horn story.
Is that the trio?
Yes, that's the trio. That's yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
for those of us who believe in diversity, real justice for all, keep not being politically neutral, in the current environment where there was, there is, and was on diversity, on truth, and on the art, do we need to be careful what we send in this regard to journalists?
So John Santos asking, hi, John. It's, thanks for being here. About should artists be mindful of, in their the political side of what they're doing, or their beliefs in promoting or advocating that through their music? Should they be mindful in contacting journalists? Could it impact coverage, I think is what John is asking. Um, I think it's sort of a case by case basis. Um, I can tell you for myself, the question becomes, it's not so much like, is this view too radical? Am I worried that the newspaper is going to be pissed? Is the editor not going to like it? It becomes that there, it becomes for me is, what is the interesting story? And say, okay, the Bay Area, there's a lot of diversity of political opinion, but there's also a lot of consensus. And if a lot of people are making similar statements through their art, it becomes, an editor might look at that as like, oh, we did a story on someone last week with those similar, doing a piece, with similar views. Are we, now you say, well, those issues are still, we haven't fixed that problem. We haven't, but I think it becomes one. I mean, I don't think anyone should, in an ideal world, doesn't downplay their politics if that's what's motivating them. That's the statement they want to make. There are times where I'll look and I'll see, in the same week, there's 2 or 3 different things happening, and they might have similar themes, right? Like similar political, advocating similar things. Then it becomes my judgment again, which is the story I find personally more interesting, and it could be the style, it could be any number of things, but I think. So I don't really have an answer to that, except to say that to the extent that there is being righteous, right? For, as an arts journalist, for me, an artist being righteous isn't ultimately what's going to decide for me to pitch a story. There's got to be something in what they're doing themselves, not just they're advocating a righteous cause that I might very well believe in, and want to support. It's got to be something happening within the, whether it's the music, the dance, that I think is going to be interesting, that I'll want to write about. So this is right, this classic struggle, classic tension between, art for art's sake, art's, what role, what is the role of an artist? I have lots of my own thoughts about this, but I'll just say is what I'm looking for ultimately is something that will, has a mix of elements, and politics might very well be part of that, but an artist who's not looking to make political statements is concerned with other things, with, different emotional topics, or exploring inner life, or spirituality, or any number of other things, are personally for me might be just as interesting a storyline. So that's this was gonna tell this. Yeah. Thank you, John. So the channel tone horns. This is this story. I kind of love this because I got this long email from the mother of one of the artists. these are two Berkeley High grads. They graduated, I don't know, 2-3 years ago. One Albany High grad. I live in Berkeley. And she had this great pitch written up to how they're at UCLA, they're doing great. They came out of the Berkeley High, Albany High jazz programs, and they're touring with the sacred singers. Now I'm spacing on their souls. Thank you. These Sacred Souls. Great band. They're their horn section, the channel tone horns. They're playing Coachella. I'm like, wow, okay, they're these kids, they're, so I pitched it to, okay, I'm going to sort of spill a little tea here. I pitched it to Berkeley side, who I've written for a lot over the years, thinking, what an awesome Berkeley side story, right? These two Berkeley High kids, they're playing Coachella, and sadly, their freelance budget is diminished, so they passed on it. I'm like, so, and the truth was, I took it to Berkeley side at first as a courtesy because I've written a lot for them. It's a Berkeley story. I want to do a Berkeley story for Berkeley side. I live in Berkeley. But I reached out to the Chronicle, to my editor there, and said, hey, there's a great local Coachella story, because Coachella is this huge story. The Chronicle covers it all the time. It's like, and within several hours, I heard back, yes, let's do it. So I wrote it for the Chronicle. I got paid more for it. I got there's pluses and minuses. I don't have as much space when I write for the Chronicle. I've got to be more succinct. There's a lot more freedom writing for Berkeley side, but so that was a natural pitch, right? It's like, because it's local, but sort of has national, international reverberance. It's so that's. And the kids, these young musicians, wouldn't have thought to reach out to me. They're doing it. It was one of their moms who wrote it up. So go mom. The SJZ break room. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, so the question is, is there a pattern to what gets, accepted or rejected in terms of pitches with editors? Okay, so to some extent, there's a few different levels of things happening, right? One level is sort of the most basic commerce level is papers are looking at what gets clicks, right? What gets views? What goes viral to any extent, right? Because ultimately, that's what they're trying to attract advertisers with stories that grab people's attention. So, and this is one reason why you don't see any or very few concert reviews anymore, is they quickly found, once all this became, the metrics started coming in, they found people don't read concert reviews. So this is sort of devastating for a lot of arts organizations, like, dance companies, though they're still, like, say, the Chronicle still reviews a lot of dance and a lot of theater, which is awesome, because you can't have a dance scene or a theater scene if it's not being reviewed and written about. But music, unless Beyonce, and I don't think they reviewed Beyonce, did they? I didn't see one. Or, I mean, it could be these huge shows, and there's no coverage. So, that's one part of it. But the other is sort of this calculus that what's culturally significant, right? So the Bay Area is very particular. If something is happening related to the Grateful Dead, it's going to get covered, right? That's just like a rule of thumb. So and if something is happening with Green Day, there's certain like cultural institutions, Kronos Quartet, right? I write a lot about Kronos Quartet. Thank God. I mean, they're this amazing ensemble. They're always presenting new music, right? That's their thing, in interesting ways. They're And there's all these narratives around what they're doing, right? It's never just like, oh, here's a new piece. It's here's a new piece from a Lebanese composer whose family fled the Civil War, and here's a piece dealing with that. So it's that there's all these narratives that go relate to the music, and so that's that those kinds of things are, and then it can be, you know, there's just sort of tropes, like kinds of stories that happen. A young musician breaking through. Everyone loves that story. So KQED Arts covered, I can't remember how extensive it was, but this young saxophonist out of Oakland, Io, I think I'm saying that right, Brame, yeah, played 2 shows at Yoshi's, sold them both out. And this is his second time doing that. Yeah, like, and it's like, that's a great story. I mean, he's 18. He's like, and the community comes out for him. So that's a great story. There's certain, and what gets tricky, and this is you know, where musicians who, if you've been around for a while, you know, you're 45, you're 50, you're doing your thing. I mean, and this is this classic sort of jazz syndrome is mid-career musicians, they like fall betwixt and between, right? They're not the you know, rising young artist anymore. They're not the grizzled veteran. So, but they might be doing their best work. They're doing all kinds of incredible stuff. So I mean, I see part of my job is how to figure out how to make sure those artists aren't neglected, that there's some story I can tell. And hopefully they're thinking about that too. You know, again, whether it's new composition, collaborating with a younger musician, doing something that is stepping outside, you know, that are just, you know, daily gigging life. So that's, you know, it is, right, man bites dog is the story, right? Is something unusual, something that is like breaks our pattern and says, oh, this is different. So, you know, young musician devoting themselves to antiquated style that no one else is playing, or, you know, doing something that we don't think of. And of course, the problem with all these are, it's very quickly people get reduced to like, you know, that can get silly very quickly, right? Because people get pigeonholed. They get because that frame of the story is so strong. So you try and avoid that, right? Like it's or to, I mean, the classic thing, I mean, I deal with this all the time is, okay, women musicians, women artists, like, well, I mean, do we really have to, like, is that being female, is that part of the story? Should it be? Does it have to be? I mean, in most cases, no. Sometimes it still can be if it makes sense. And, you know, I'll plead guilty to sometimes I think this is I'm more likely to get an assignment by pitching it this way at this time, even though I think it's not really necessary. And if I'm writing that, I'll try and kind of make it clear that it's not really necessary in the story, even as I'm doing it. You know, make of that what you will. Let's see. Oh, that was the SJs. Yes. Okay. So this is another kind of way to the San Jose Jazz. They have this in their office in downtown San Jose. They've got what they call the break room. And they took part of their office during the pandemic and turned it into a venue where they can, I think they're still broadcasting, streaming their shows, but they're booking all these great artists there. So they also did some commissioning, small commissions with artists, and they did a series of concerts to present those commissions. This is a great story, right? I'm going to take to, again, Bay Area News Group, San Jose Mercury News sort of being the flagship of that. So it's local for San Jose, right? There's this, you know, newspapers love, you know, being able to cover stuff in their backyard, looking for something interesting happening there. And I pitched this. I didn't even realize, like, the artist who was leading it off had this amazing story. You know, she's Iranian, grew up in France, if I'm remembering this right. She was doing, for the first time, had really delved into using some traditional Persian music with sort of funk and jazz. And this, like, I only found this out really interviewing her, like, well, the background. So she was sort of the lead of the piece, but this was, a natural pitch. And anyone sort of in this series, like, this was sort of a great opportunity for them, like, to try and get press, because you're part of this sort of bigger story that, that maybe San Jose Metro would want to cover. Metro Silicon Valley, I think is what it's called now, or any other of the public South Bay publications, thinking, oh, we should be covering this. This is our backyard. A lot of the artists are South Bay artists. So a natural pitch. I'll just do one more and then just sort of opening it up again for questions. It's the Michael Carvin story. Yeah.
It's not always the narrative of whatever, the story of the album or whatever, but also like how it plays within, maybe it's like we released on Bandcamp Friday, and all of Bandcamp Friday is now this big thing, and so that's like in the theme. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So Crystal's asked me that there's sort of two levels of things happening. One is sort of the scene and how a story might describe or fit into a larger picture, and the specific sort of narrative story of the artist or the project that's being written about. And absolutely, and they go together in a lot of ways. So like, exactly like that break room story. And I love those stories, right? Because I'm getting to do a lot of things, right? New venue stories, or a venue having again, a milestone, like, oh, this is their 5th year, or say Keys Jazz Bistro in North Beach. First year they were open. At the end of the first year, well, I did a story when they opened up. Let's go back after 1 year. And part of that is, well, who are they presenting? What's happened during that year? So you've got like I want to highlight the artists who are playing there, and interview one, and why the scene, the spaces work for them, what they like about it, while talking about how this club has come to fit in to the music scene. And so to get those different sort of elements going, again, makes a really strong story. So that's sort of how artists can sort of think about, like, I'm hoping artists are sort of thinking about, well, how I can collaborate with the journalists, with me, also like with venues, hopefully. And I mean, there can be some natural tension between artists and venues and venue owners, but my sense is that there are some really supportive, soulful venue owners who are like, really they're in this, they're not getting rich. They are in this because they want to support the scene and help it thrive. And the degree to which, I mean, like, someone who's done this really well is like, Adam Thies and the Jazz Mafia, where they're like, well, let's do a residency and let's bring our people in, and we're going to present different music each time. And there's a sense of like, oh, it's, the way they're interacting with a venue. I mean, this is what builds a scene. So that is, those things are always kind of, they're sort of separate, and I can pitch a story based on just one of them, but ideally, my favorite stories are ones where they interact and they're really coming together and then threaded. Yeah, this is like a story. I mean, you can, this angle works for you or it doesn't. It probably doesn't, because I got to do a story. So Jazz Sawyer, great drummer, came up in San Francisco, now lives in LA, reached out to me and said, Michael Carvin, legendary jazz drummer. He lived in the Bay Area for, a year or two in the 70s. He hasn't played here since then. So 50 years. He's coming back. he's going to play his first San Francisco gigs in like 50 years. I'm like, oh, that's a great story. So I get to write about Michael Carvin, who, has amazing stories to tell from, working with Freddie Hubbard, Bobby Hutcherson, blah, blah, blah. And it's his return. I'll tell you the thing what's funny about this story is, like, he hasn't played her for 50 years. And I was on the phone with Carvin for, I think, 2 hours or something. And I was never able to pin him down on why exactly he hadn't been back. I mean, he works all the time. He works all over the world. And I still, next time I interview him, I'll try and get him exactly. But he is he tells stories in his own way, and I was sort of never able to pin that down. So, and I think I put that in the lead. Like I never quite got that, but he is coming back, and they, recording an album at Black Cat, and that's what's happening. So this happened about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, something like that. Yeah. Hopefully he'll be back again. I mean, it was a spectacular night. So that's kind of what I got for you. I can talk a lot more about, what I'm interested in that, but to people, let me open it up just again, if people have specific questions about pitches. And I should say for you guys and people online that I am easy to reach and easy to find. And, people want to reach out, have a question about any of this. I'm happy to, I talk with musicians all the time. They'll schedule a chat on the phone or just email. It's we are in an environment of scarcity when it comes to the media, right? We all know journalism is in terrible shape. And there's no prospect of it getting better. No one has figured out how to support reporting, which is inherently expensive to do well. And the reality of of newspapers, magazines, publications that the internet makes siphons off all the money that used to go into display ads, and so there's just there's some models that are working, sort of nonprofit models and things on a small scale, but arts coverage is just in terrible shape. So I consider it just an incredible privilege to get to do what I do, that I've been able to do it as long as I have. I hope I can keep doing it. I'm always thinking about what the plan B is, but there's because there's so much, we were blessed to live in this place where there's just so much amazing creativity and so many different things happening. And so writing about that and trying to cover that and capture that is just tremendously fun. And but it really there are fewer places to do it, and there we were always looking for younger people coming up who are passionate about the arts and want to do this, and there are some, and a lot of times it's musicians who also like to write, who want to do both, which so it's two difficult lifestyles instead of one. But yeah, I sort of don't have any answers to that, but yeah.
Still lists the concerts, and it was such a great resource. You could just go through it on a Sunday, and you knew what was coming up, and this is happening today. I'll make time, blah blah blah, and that's gone. And the only thing left are these huge ads, and if you subscribe to some of the websites that will let you know, but it seems almost random, and I just love that list. Is there any chance it may come back?
I don't know. I mean, again, the internal discussion about how does that, we know the pink section's gotten smaller and smaller. There's less and less space in there. and their, you know, their calculation of how best to use that space. I don't know how that discussion goes. I mean, for me, it was, right, it was definitely the pink section, but it was the weeklies. I'd pick up the East Bay Express, the Guardian, and, you just like, oh my God, what are we going to do this weekend? There's so much happening. And like, yeah, I don't know. I just think about like, oh, it's my business to know what's going on, right? I'm constantly looking, but I'm like, I have friends, like friends regularly, but what's going on this weekend? It's like, like you, yeah.
Now, okay, am I supposed to take out a piece of paper and write this down, or?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The other question I had was, how of the noise? You're a small group, I have no hope for that, so that's unusual in itself, but the symphony, the opera, the ballet, the well-known chamber groups that come through, etc. It's very hard to get any attention. I used to, with my old group, call the various radio stations myself, or write an email for a PSA, and sometimes they read. That's all gone.
Yeah. So question, should I repeat? Is that makes it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So question is how to rise above the noise, and for a small ensemble to get some attention competing against all the much larger organizations. And I mean, I think the sort of the things I was saying is like, well, what is there a story behind any particular gig or set of gigs? Really, one is like one-offs, like this one, we're doing this one show and that's what's here. That's hard for me. That's a hard pitch, right? Because we're doing 4 shows over the course of a month, one in the South Bay, one in here, East Bay, one in San Francisco. Oh, then it becomes much more like, the publications, say KQED Arts or Bay Area News Group, they like the geographic spread, right? Because it's like, oh, they, their readers, in Alameda County are also feel like it's not just, oh, we always have to go into the city or in the South Bay. So there's that, but having the story about, you know, are you playing somewhere maybe unusual? Like a different play. It reminds me of so Matt Wilson, the jazz drummer, had this great thing where he'll talk about, let's break out of the box, right? Like a jazz group, you sit down in your club, you play your set, you don't introduce your tunes. He's like, put a musician in a different place, do something different, shake it up. And I think that can really work for ensembles, too. I mean, artists too, is like, well, you're setting up outside somewhere, like, oh, Golden Gate Park and did this. And there's, I mean, just so it's like, because there's lots of small ensembles who are going to be playing, this, a small theater here. And it's like, well, okay, if there's sort of new music happening, if there's something, what is the story, right? And that becomes, again, you don't want it to be like, just totally gimmicky but what is the story? And that's, and trying to, hopefully, ideally, in thinking about how to present that way and doing that, it adds to the music, right? You get to a new place, that's something different that maybe you wouldn't have gotten to otherwise. So it works together. But that's, I mean, so how do you get to a reporter? I mean, I think that's incumbent on artists to like, where are the cover, like, where are you seeing coverage that you like? Where are you seeing making note of that? So it's like, I mean, because there's really only a few of us. And if you see a new name, like I do this, a new name will show up. A story is in the Chronicle. I'm like, I don't recognize that byline. And immediately do a search, look for them on Facebook. And I'll see, oh, they're doing this, and I might try and friend them on Facebook. I work at home all day alone, right? Like I'm always like, well, where are the other writers? Who else is doing this? I haven't been good about like creating events for other writers getting together, but there's this idea of I want to know who else is out there who might be interested. So, and talking to again fellow artists who like, do you have a press list? And now, I mean, it used to be like that's something publicists did. They'd have their whole press list, and they had, yeah, now it's like, well, it's one page and there's like 5 names on it, but that's valuable, information and cultivating that. Like, here are the 5 people I want to try and reach out to, send an email. Yeah.
I did, on the screen, but you brought up the pink section. I wanted to just mention the Bay Improviser.
Yes.
Because that's a very cool resource that's quite active, and it's a unique thing to the Bay. And you can reach out to Matt Ingalls, who runs it, and get yourself set up on there. And it's a pretty thorough, compendium of shows in a kind of in a specific scene, but still, it's a good model of what is working, in my opinion.
No,
The Bay Improviser. I'll put the link.
I use it all the time. I'm always like, and figuring out, oh, is this person still live in the Bay Area? Oh no, they moved, or they're back, or whatever it is. Okay, it's an invaluable website. I totally agree. Yeah. Hi.
I was curious if you could talk for just briefly about, I know we have to wrap soon, about interdisciplinary projects. So, I think here in the Bay Area we see maybe more of that than we do in other places. So maybe it's a little in our culture a little bit, but for you, where does it really hit, or where does it maybe miss a little bit? Are there particular stories that you find in interdisciplinary art projects that really?
So the question's about interdisciplinary arts projects and, what might work in terms of finding a story there. Is that, yeah. 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 So, yeah, there's a tremendous number and variety of interdisciplinary projects here, and I love that. My way in is often music, and that's so it's like music and dance, music and aerial arts, music, and so I'm often coming to it that way. So I'm looking like, oh, so like Circus Bella, right? Like our no ring circus that performs for free all around. Well, they have this amazing band, Rob Reich and the Circus Bella All-Stars. Well, I love Rob's music. I love all the musicians in the group. Well, so I mean, I might write about Circus Bella anyways, but like the fact that they've got live new score for each production, that for me, again, that's my sweet spot. Like I'm going to, likely to pitch that. The challenge with interdisciplinary projects is, and this can be true in all theater, all different kinds of things, is that describing it is hard, and not just for the artists themselves trying to describe what it is. I mean, writing about it. I do this all the time, right? There's some big Cal Performances production, but it's premiering, right? So no one's seen it. Like, I see a few clips of video of the work in progress, but I interview people about it, and you write about it, and you just pray that what I'm writing has some correspondence to what's actually happening on stage, and that someone who read it might be like, oh, okay, I liked it, I didn't like it, but it wasn't totally out of left field. So that's a challenge, and I think that's in pitching them, it's hard. But I personally, I love it, and I think arts writers like that. It's fun. There's a lot of sort of natural stories, right? Like writing about music can be inherently like challenging because no one, wants to read about harmonic progressions and this rhythmic cycle or this metric will shift. That's not, you want to have something else to talk about that's sort of more concrete, and an interdisciplinary project has that, right? It's whether it's the theatrical element, the dance element, the spoken word element, whatever it is. And in a lot of ways, we're writers, we're much more comfortable with that because it's concrete detail, and then trying to capture how they all interact. So that's, I think those often make great stories. And they're often, that there is an inherent story there in how are these artists coming together, right? Like that's right there. If it's a new project, well, I mean, maybe they've worked together a lot and it's a story about how their collaboration has evolved, or maybe it's the first time they've worked together and this, Buto artist is doing something with this free saxophonist. And you're like, oh, well, how are they inspiring each other? And again, that's a, ooh, I could see writing that, right? Any,
I think the last thing that I want to ask.
yeah. Yes. Yeah. So the question about touring and how to, try and pick up coverage when you're on the road and you're going to be somewhere. And, this is where I think the musician's grapevine is just so important. Hopefully, I mean, if you're playing in Reno, you don't know anyone in Reno, it's just tough. And you could spend, how much time do you want to devote to it? You could do a little, searching around the internet and say, oh, like this person seems to cover jazz for the Reno, whatever the paper is in Reno. And I'm going to reach out to them because I think, they'd want to know that. And you really, again, this is where it becomes, well, what are you pitching them, right? Like, is there anything that city specific? Maybe one of the band members is from there. Maybe there's, the more you can tailor it to why they would want, to cover it, aside from you're a band on the road who's playing there. But maybe there's some, maybe you just played Coachella and now you're going there. Maybe, there's something, but I mean, I'll have musicians do this all the time. They're like, oh, I'm playing, the back room in Berkeley. We're from New York. We're out here. And I mean, maybe I'll have that's sort of interesting on its own. You don't have a chance to see them very often. So can put it in a newsletter that I'll do for Berkeley side, but a whole story. I mean, it's not that they're not like totally interesting and worth the whole story, but how am I going to pitch that to Berkeley side? Right. Like so it's like, how are you pitching yourself to that specific publication that, might make sense for them to be like, oh yeah, we've got to cover that. So always tricky. You guys, thank you so much. I'm going to bring Crystal back up to, but this has been a lot of fun. So again, come up, you see me at a gig or reach out to me online. Always happy to talk to folks.
Angie, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. I just wanted to make one quick announcement about the upcoming workshops that we have. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. You can watch your calendar for grant writing with Melody Hernandez of Reach, Root, Rise on Thursday, May 22nd. So about a little over a week from now. Same places, same time. A Feldenkrais workshop with flutist and practitioner Stacy Palinka on Tuesday, May 27th. So that's a little less than a week after that one. And then a week later, I will start a 3-part series on individual fundraising, covering crafting your mission statement, what the difference between annual donors versus major donors, and that and cultivation of those different types of contributors, fundraising campaigns, timelines, and events, and volunteers, managing your volunteers, advisory boards, building them, engaging them, and relations for potential board members if that's the route you're going in. So I hope you all can continue to engage with this spring's workshop series. And thank you again to Andy for a fantastic workshop. Yay.
All right, well, thank you.